I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati.
Hello. Welcome, guys, and welcome to Sabs podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. I have a special guest with me tonight, Craig Jardula. You may know him as Pasta. He's the co-host of the Convo Couch. Welcome, Pasta. Thanks so much for coming on.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on. It's, as every single podcaster or independent thinks that their topic or their wheelhouse is very important. I do too. And I can't thank you enough for bringing me on your show to talk about Colombia and Venezuela and the region right now, because it is so important.
Thanks so much. So recently I was covering the elections in Colombia, about the victory that just happened for Gustavo and for Francia. And I did receive a lot of questions after that stream. Some of the questions were, how are they able to do that in their country, and we can't elect leftists here in the United States? Some people were asking about the history of Colombia and Venezuela as well. And so I'm so glad that you're able to come on. How about we start with the history? Like, where does this all begin? Because I know Colombia is, for the most part, has been a conservative country politically.
Yeah. I believe they're called the Yorubismos. They were there for a while, the Yorubismo with an M. Which was after, I believe, Alvaro Uribe, and that was in the early 2000s. It was a conservative leader. He was elected, and since then, that's been the ruling party there. They've had a history of fraudulent elections, a lot of elections that came into question. However, this time out, the incrementalism of fixing the elections over the last several years and the last several elections got to a point where they had a fair, transparent election. I mean, there were still areas in which we're concerned about, but for the most part, it was a pretty fair and transparent elections. I think everything was fair and transparent in the first round. There were some questions on the tabulation machines where it gets into a little bit of the darkness, but for the most part, I believe everything played out the way it should. A very tight race. Petro won by less than 700,000 votes, but the main goal of this election wasn't to elect a person who's going to come in with radical change, sweeping change, a hardcore socialist. Gustavo Petro was a guerrilla back in the days. There's a classic picture of him and Hugo Chavez when they worked together at one point. But he, along the line, he's had different positions within the government, whatnot, including being mayor of Bogota. And he's kind of moved a little bit closer to the center, and he's considered center left of sorts. He's not there for radical change. He's there for changing of the guards. There's not going to be a whole lot of change, I think, in the next several years. But the small change that will happen is significant change. And the most important part for people to understand is that when we go there, when we analyze, when we talk about this election in Colombia, there's one job we have, one objective, and that's to make sure they have a fair, transparent, and publicly verifiable election, so the people of Colombia choose who they want moving forward. And this was definitely a coalition of people. All right, this is what we can get. We're going to get real incrementalism, but we will get change, and that's what we want. And Colombia is a very sophisticated place. It's a NATO country next to Venezuela, its neighbor, which also has very strong ties with Russia. So there's a lot of ins and outs. There's a lot of nuance to the situation. But from what we just witnessed and the changing of the guard and what's happening in Latin America, and it's happening because the election system is fair and transparent. And this is the key. This is what everybody's missing, that if we had this type of system, we can get the people we want to choose. Then we'll have all different types of problems but there'll be different problems down the road. But at least this problem, as far as a representative government, we'd have a shot.
Awesome. So I do want to put up this tweet here because there was something that you mentioned about their elections in general. Colombia's elections include ID required, 1 day of voting, Sunday, designated voting location, no mail-in or drop box voting, expedient vote times, average 5 minutes, hand-marked paper ballots, public hand counting.
Yep.
Only a fair election system can bring real change. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, yeah, the last sentence, only a fair election system can bring apart real change. I mean, we get to witness it. We got to go to Nicaragua about 6 months ago, and we went all over the country. We went to the autonomous zones, the region in Bilwi of Nicaragua. We flew from Managua to Bilwi across to the other side. So we were in the indigenous area, and we got to witness the election system. We were all spread out with people like Margaret Kimberly and Ben Rubenstein and Wyatt Reed, and we were pinging each other throughout the whole island. And everything that I just talked about in this whole tweet right over here is the same thing you see in Peru, in Honduras, and now in Colombia. So when you have a system like this, and it's just a return to simplicity, but it's very, very transparent. And the people there in all these countries that I just mentioned, Sabby, they understand the process. They understand the rules. So when you have a system when you have to show up with an ID requirement, and it's kind of crazy because here in the States, what do we hear? If you ask for ID, in some parts, they're saying you're being racist, that you shouldn't be doing that that's affecting people of color, or it's affecting poor people or people who can't get an ID. Well, in these countries, they actually push for more identification processes because they understand that that's how the ruling class can cheat it. So they make sure it's easy to get an ID. That's the way they fix the system. And everybody in this third world countries that we went to, in Nicaragua, and Colombia, and whatnot, and they have in the high 60 percentile turnouts, usually, they all have IDs. So therefore, it's very hard to fix an election if everybody has IDs. And if everybody goes to the same voting spot, the designated voting spot, and you can't go to multiple areas, then it makes it harder to cheat. Yesterday on RBN, I heard the crew talking about elections. They were talking about a Colombia elections, and I don't know if it was Compton, Jay, or Nick, but one of them said, like, oh, yeah, and they get to vote on Sunday, and everybody has off. Yeah, it's a Sunday. It's a national holiday. You have off from work. But then you hear about the point where you say expediency, right? When they use the term out here, the Democrats or the establishment Republicans, the rhinos, or whatever you want to call them, all the people who are gaining the system, they'll say, oh, we got to make it accessible. That's why we got to have drop boxes. But there's no chain of custody in a drop box. And with all these extra ballots out there and with the machines counting test ballots, you can cheat an election very easy. So drop boxes are a very big security risk. Same with mail-in voting. They don't have that in these countries. And guess what? Instead of when you go to the polls like it was in UCLA, where it takes you 4 hours to vote, you're in and out in 5, 6, 7 minutes. It's one of the fun things we like to do, Sabby. We grab our phones and we ask somebody, hey, man, can we time you from the time you come in to the time you're done voting? And we hit the stopwatch and we just time it. It's always under 7, 8 minutes, 6 minutes it takes to get in and out to vote. That's part of being accessible, is being expedient. And then at the end of the day, when everything's closed down, they open it up to the public. They open up their ballot box at each table in front of the public, and they do public hand counting for everybody to witness. Not whisk it off to this secret tabulation room that has proprietary software where we're not even allowed to look at it. And whatever they tell us the results are, we have to accept it. Publicly funded elections for private corporations to run. It's a nightmare. And in these countries, they just return to simplicity. And that's why they have real change. That is why they are getting grassroots candidates into office. That's why they have the first Afro-Colombian woman from the Caribbean holding the office of vice president in Colombia. That's why they're able to do it, because of the election system.
How would you describe their voter turnout? Do they have a strong voter turnout compared to the United States, you think?
Well, Colombia definitely had the least amount of turnout of the 4 countries that I witnessed. But it's still up near the 60 percentile range. So I'd like to see a little bit more of a turnout over there. You know, Peru, it's higher. Nicaragua, there was close to the 70% turnout. Honduras was hitting high. So they show up. But, I mean, when it's accessible and it's easy to vote, you're going to get a great turnout. It's so simple. So it's higher than it should be, but I think there's like a lot of poor peasants and whatnot who, they stay out of the fray and they don't go to the polls as much, whatnot, in some of those countries. So it could be a little bit better. I'd like to see countries with a 70%, turnout. That's kind of like, that's really, really high, but that's something I'd like to see, even though I'm not kind of fond of some people voting who I don't think should be voting because they don't know what's going on as well. So I got mixed feelings, but it's a decent sized number.
One of the things that Roger Meadows has mentioned, he's a friend of the show. He's probably a friend of your show too. He's on everybody's shows. He comes in the chat. But Roger Meadows mentioned that he's been talking to people recently, asking them why they vote for the people they vote for. And what he found is that they're voting for people not based on the issues they're running on, but just because the way they feel about the person, like they like the person. So they get attached to the personality per se, right? What's the impression that you get in the global South? Are they voting on the issues, or are they voting because they like the person that's running?
I sent you a tweet the other day, right, with a gentleman kicking up a bottle cap off a beer. You know what I'm saying? The cap of a beer. I was very lucky and honored to celebrate the first election with some student activists. One of those activists had an eye patch on because it had his eyes shot out at a protest. I was taken down to Plaza Bolivar, where a lot of students had protests, and there were actual bricks removed from the ground from the students fighting with the paramilitary police forces there and whatnot, and using gas and rubber bullets and whatnot. It's like intensified from what we've witnessed in the United States. And I heard a quote from somebody who said over there about kind of talking about what goes on in the United States, talking about wokeness, because there was this kind of argument that, this was a Soros-funded candidate that came on in there to usher wokeness.
Right.
We don't see the wokeness existing over there that we do over here. What they say is that wokeness is a luxury for liberals in the global North that can't be afforded in the global South. They don't like talking about those things. They like talking about the economic issues because then they're talking about things they agree on that they need to change within the government rather than things that separate them. So you don't see a lot of wokeness. I mean, when I was in Nicaragua, I remember a woman in Bilwi tell me, and this is in the autonomous zone, an indigenous person, she's like, I don't understand and get the feminism talk you have in the United States. To us, here in the global South, feminism is all economics, about infrastructure so we can get around. It's about education so I can take my kids to school. It's about hospitalization so I can make sure that my kids are healthy, whatnot. This whole kind of conversation you're having in the States where you like somebody for whatever reason, it's just confusing. They rally and they back behind people who are going to help change their lives. That's why Francia Marquez got in there. In fact, it was like Petro had brokered a deal. She's the radical. She's the leftist. She's the one that the students just love. Now, there's been a lot of talk with Petro, a famous picture with him, been Bill Clinton, and whatnot. There's a USAID commercial, I believe Francia Marquez did, whatnot. But people have to understand that NGOs are saturated in places like Colombia. Colombia had a lot of parallels to what was going on in Honduras. You have a westernized country with the boot on the neck of the people, stealing their resources, thrusting them into the monetary system through austerity measures. And you have these guys who are trying to run for office and kind of maneuver around what's going on. They're not like Daniel Ortega from Nicaragua, who fought a revolution to say Yankee go home, and he has no U.S. military bases in his own country. Same thing with Maduro. When it comes to guys like Petro, when it comes to guys like Xiomara, you know what I'm saying? We went to Honduras. They can't do what a lot of people are kind of thrusting out there that they should do, that they should nationalize their oil right away, go to business with China. If they do that, if Petro does something like that, or Xiomara does something like that, if they don't play ball with the United States empire and the NGOs there, they'll either be cooed, killed, or just been thrusted away. And they've done this before. They're celebrating at the end of the month, I think the 14-year anniversary, I'm not sure what year it is, of when the United States military helped out the Honduran military to remove Manuel Zelaya from the country in the middle of the night just because he joined ALBA a week later, which was a unification with Cuba, Nicaragua, and Venezuela. So when people say these things, they don't understand what's going on. There is some naivety to, Francia Marquez. I think she put up a tweet with something from NASA. She put up a tweet with AOC congratulating her and stuff. Yeah. So there's going to be a learning curve. But these people are going to have to get their elbows dirty. Like I said, they're not in there to produce radical sweeping change. They're out there to simply change the guard, alleviate the boot off the neck from the United States imperialist. You know what I'm saying? It's a NATO country, for crying out loud. The only one in South America. The largest recipients of guns in the global South is Colombia. So it's dirty there. There's work to be done. But I think people have to understand what's going on. And, I don't play the identity politics game too much, Sabby, but I'm going to say this one. They need less people looking like me telling them what to do. We were there to ensure that they make their choice moving forward. And by choosing Petro, they were just choosing to get rid of the actual governments there, the narco governments there, and then start the process of moving forward. The next person to come into Colombia, the next president, that person might be able to get some radical change what's going on. But right now, first things first, stop the bleeding, and then they'll move on.
I want to share this video. This is the tweet that you sent me here. It says, "It was an honor to celebrate Colombian election with several student activists. Now look at the gentleman with the eye patch. He lost it when the Duque police forces shot it during a protest. These people aren't fighting for wokeness. They're fighting for their lives." I'm going to go ahead and play this here.
I didn't film the first two. I was confident there.
That's because filming. Nunca me demoré tanto. La presión.
Just having fun in Colombia. Yeah.
Wow. Like, one thing I want to say too, I've been telling people we don't actually have like a true left in the United States. I mean, we have people that say they're leftists or socialists or Marxists, so have it. But in reference to like a true like left, I keep telling people America is, for the most part, a conservative country, like based on what I've seen. But in the global South, and Josana has talked about this as well, coming from Brazil, she's told us that in America, we really don't have it here. We think we do, but we don't when you compare it to what they have happening in the global South.
Yeah, absolutely. We say this all the time. And we started saying this after our first trip down to Nicaragua. There's no left in America, but there's an American left. And boy, are they special. And, like I said, down in Nicaragua, I learned so much things when I was over in Bilway. And I would say this all the time. Fee doesn't like when I say it, but I'm going to say it anyways. I said a lot of the Nicaraguan people are very much like Trumpers who speak Spanish. She's, what do you mean by that? I'm like, they're very socially conservative, right? They're in an autonomous zone where they have their own judges and whatnot. And this is a socialist country. They don't believe in gay marriage. They don't believe in abortion. They're not going to legalize marijuana. They're very confused if you try to talk to them about the transgender issue. They have a hard time wrapping it around their brains. Very religious, praying on Sundays. So it's like they're so socially conservative. But when it comes to their economics, that's where they get left. None of this, like, what do you call it? That campus Marxism of sorts, where it's all about the social issues and stuff. No, it's an economic left where they care that their money, for their tax dollars, are used for infrastructure, schools, education, roads, the things we talk about all the time. You know what I'm saying? And in fact, in Bilwi, the autonomous zone, the federal government only shows up when there's a disaster like a hurricane or for infrastructure projects they're doing. They allow them to do their own thing. It's almost like a separation of, state and country of sorts in these two autonomous zones. And they've brokered these deals. So, I mean, it's very, very different to what we experience in America. The American left is not left at all. And in these other countries, it's just completely different. You just get a whole totally different aspect on life when you get to go to these countries and see this and witness this. And when you're going to these countries and you're witnessing these elections, you really understand that through elections is how people take back power, if they've ever had it. A chance for real change. The process is through elections. And I go there. We obviously go there to scrutinize, to make sure the process is fair for the people, for the Colombians. But there's a big piece of me that likes to bring it home and say, guys, we can do this. We can change our election system. You're being duped. We're being cheated. We'll never get a grassroots candidate through like this. This is what we got to do. Return to simplicity. Plain and simple.
Yeah. And I want to express to people too, because paper ballots. So it's a little bit different. For example, we have paper ballots in Massachusetts, but we still have to put them through a machine.
Yeah.
What Pasta is referring to is they have paper ballots, but they hand count them.
Yeah.
So
hand mark them, hand count them.
Yeah, our process here in the United States, it's all over the place. It depends on what state you live in, what district you live in. Some places have the machines. And I remember this living in North Carolina. They had machines back then. I don't know if they still do now, but they had machines. And I remember it was kind of tricky depending on who you wanted to select, because the line didn't even match up with the name. It wasn't horizontally across. So you could easily accidentally select the wrong one. And I think that's on purpose.
Yeah, that is by design. And that was also done in Florida in 2000. They called it a hanging chads. And out of that, you talk about one of the worst presidencies of all times, at least of my times, George W. Bush, when he ushered in not only the Patriot Act, he also ushered in the HAVA, Help America Vote Act, which made sure that the majority of our election systems would revert to machines, would matriculate to machines. And that meant private counting, tabulation machines. In Colombia, in Nicaragua, and Honduras, it's so simple. The ballot is nice and big. You put a big X there. You put it in the box. It's so simple the way it's all set up. The witness program in Colombia, they have a jury program where they select random jurors, what they're called, and there's 6 of them at a table, and they don't know each other, and they're there to witness the election at each table, and it's so expedient. And at the end, I swear to you, Sabby, in Honduras, I cried. Here we are, Xiomara Castro. Now, just imagine you're with the people of Honduras out there. Manuel Zelaya has been ousted in a coup many years ago. His wife is now running. They just had an election in 2017, which was so bad and so cheated, but they kept the results that these people, they're just desperate for change. They have their songs. They're in the streets. The number one song in Honduras was a song by Johnny Ventura called Sevan. You know what I'm saying? And now we get to the counting process and all the people there, and they're making sure, and it's like you're at the track. There's a lot of noise, and they're yelling, and they're like, no, make sure we can see what you're doing, what not. Very transparent. And they start counting the votes, and they're like, 1 vote, Xiomara, and somebody marks it on the board, and they're holding up, and you hear the people going, yeah, 1 vote, Party Nacional, boo. But just the excitement of being there, it's like, I want this in the United States. Why can't we have this? This is so transparent. They're counting the ballots in front of us. You can then run them through a machine after with an open source software to make sure that count matches the hand count if you want. I'm all for that. But we got to get back to this way because it's so transparent. It's so efficient. And that night, after one night, hours later, you get the results on who's going to win.
Hours later?
In Honduras was a little bit long because they stopped the whole process at one point. But in Colombia, 2 hours later, they were announced in Petro when the polls closed, like 6:15, 2 hours and change. Same thing in Nicaragua. Peru was a little bit different because it came down to a short amount of votes. But in Colombia, there were, I can't remember if it was close to, I don't know if it was close to 100 million votes and whatnot. It came down to like 700,000 votes. That's how close this race was. This was not like and 2.5 hours later, they still had the results at hand because it's so simple. Everything's set up for simplicity. We got to get to this. I get lost for words when I talk about it sometimes because our election system is so jacked from the mail-in voting, which people think are fair. And there's just so many different ways the ruling class can cheat an election with mail-ins. It was said in 2014 in a bipartisan, it was like a little convention they had. It was bipartisan with Jimmy Convention and James Baker. And they went in there to discuss how to make elections fair and what are the most vulnerable parts of the elections. They both agreed that it was mail-in ballots that are the most vulnerable for fraud, and they are. Now you add drop boxes into the situation, so that whole system is messed up. That's why we had so many different votes. It's just ridiculous. And the solution for the idiots out there, I'm so sorry, who watched Dinesh D'Souza's movie to say to put cameras on every drop box is the answer. No, it's to eliminate drop boxes. We need to eliminate drop boxes. The only way an election is fair if you have a designated location where you show up with your ID and you vote where you're at, and that vote is counted where it's cast. That's the only way to have a fair election, and we can do it. It doesn't have to take hours to vote. It takes minutes in these countries. We can do the same thing here.
What do you say to people who have been fear-mongering? It's already happening on mainstream media, that are fear-mongering to Americans that we need to be afraid because what's happening in South America, because they're electing leftists, they're electing socialists. What do you say to those people?
Well, I mean, there's several different people who kind of say that. The ones that make me the most nervous is the Ron DeSantis crew and the South Florida crew, because I've lived down in South Florida. I went to school there. I pretty much grew up there. Even though I was born in New York, I spent most of my life in Florida. And the DeSantis crew, who just passed a bill that makes schools within Florida that they have to teach the victims of communism, the horrifying results of communism have to be taught within school. Now, I'm no advocate for communism. I really am not. I believe in a mixed system across the board. But whatever system these people choose that they vote for, that's the democracy. Those people should shut up and worry about what's going on at home, that we have an election system that's so awful that we can't have a representative government, but a third world country can have it. And whatever they choose down there, we should stand by what they choose. The real problem, what's going on right now, is that we have this imperialist mindset in the global South. We have 80 bases throughout the global South. We steal resources. You know what I'm saying? This is true imperialism going on down there too as well. And it's only going to get worse once we run out of gas over in the Ukraine and that region. We're going to start losing our grip in the global South because, these leftist presidents, they're not just leftist presidents. They're populist presidents. They're not voted upon because they're left and they're going to give things to people. The reasons why they're supported in these countries is because they're fighting against the American empire, and they like strong leaders. It's more of a collective mindset to get rid of the imperialists that are invading their land. That's what they're going through. That's the main thing they vote on. So all these jerks that are saying all this stuff there, and I don't mean to use the term jerk. You disagree with somebody, but it's a disingenuous argument. You know what I'm saying? This is about imperialism. For all those people who want a border wall and everything like that, how about we just stop invading these countries and picking dictators to run those countries for our corporations to make millions of dollars, thrusting those countries into chaos and then thrusting people to come to the border? How about we do that? How about instead of stop working backwards, we start working in the right direction? So, I mean, there's so much that's going on in the global South that we need to change, that we need to make people aware of. So when these people say these things that they're nervous and whatnot, I don't care. They don't know what they're talking about. Go down there and see what it's like, and you'll have a different opinion.
I hear you. I have one more question for you. When you look at politics here in the United States, going into 2024, what do you feel is going to happen? Do you feel that someone is going to be, because I've said this multiple times, I don't think there's anyone in DC right now that has the guts to primary challenge Joe Biden, and that includes Bernie Sanders. Do you think that they are going to find a way to push Joe Biden out and nominate someone else? Do you see the Democrats possibly even having a chance of winning in 2024? Or do you think that this is now the time for someone who's an independent or third party to possibly make some noise?
Yeah, I think you hit it on the nose, the last one, because I was just about to say, as you were asking that question, I don't care what the Democrats do, right? I don't care what the Republicans do. This duopoly is just ridiculous. And, for people who don't think that establishment Republicans had anything to do with the last election, think again. Joe Biden won the election, but none of the Democrats got the coattails. How come that was that? But the last answer, I think, is the one we need to examine right now. And I think we have to start getting serious about asking this question. The third party that could be is the Libertarian Party. Okay. enough with this MPP stuff that's got no ballot access, hasn't done any work. The Green Party, which is falling apart, and who knows what's going on. Which there are some people who I think fighting within the Green Party that if they ever got a hold of it, can really make some noise. But that's going to be some time away. Right now, with the Mises Caucus taking power within the Libertarian Party, that's where we have to look. And I think it's going to come down to a lot of progressive left-leaning people. Are they going to want to go to the polls and vote for a libertarian? That's the question. So I think there's a lot of work to be done for the Libertarian Party to get that kind of mindset. But I think they'll grab a decent part of the right because there's always been conservative libertarians like Rand Paul, Thomas Massie in office. How does the Libertarian Party itself, though, grab the people on the left? They'll get some people on the right. And then again, we have this whole situation, where if you remember, what was the name? Who used to run for the Green Party, Jill Stein, right? Mm-hmm. She protested election in Michigan, and they found some serious stuff. So the system in play seems like it will stop any third party from getting to 5%. But with the Mises Caucus and the Libertarian Party, it might be big enough. It might be a populist movement. You got some young comedians in there, and Dave Smith, who might be running for president. Guys like Scott Horton, who are becoming really, really popular right now, that got a lot of people's ears. Spike Cohen will return. I know a lot of these people might not be known. But did you also know, Sabby, that there's a Libertarian Socialist Caucus inside the Libertarian Party?
No, I did not know that.
A lot of people don't know that. There's lib socias out there. So I think that is what we have to pay attention to right now is can we get this third party to 5%? I think they have a legitimate shot. They got like a kind of a populist aura about them. Dave Smith does Skankfest and whatnot. And I think Spike Cohen, I don't know if he's going to be the VP. I don't know who will be, but that's where we got to look right now. You know what I'm saying? We have to really examine the Libertarian Party right now because they do have their shit together more than any of the other parties right now with ballot access, people in positions. They won so many small seats around the country. They have their stuff together. That is where we have to have a serious look right now.
One more question. I'm sorry I lied.
It's okay. I got all the time for you, Sabby.
In the global South.
Yes.
I'm not sure if you had a chance to ask them this, but how do they feel about Assange? What's happening with him?
Yeah.
Are they aware of? Yeah.
I mean, they know about Assange. They know what's going on about Assange. We talked about Assange. Just recently, me and Fiorella went down to the Tijuana border, and we met with a bunch of activists out there that were throwing a protest at the border on the beach over there against the blockade and against the treatment of the way America treated the global South during the whole pandemic and shutting them off from many things. They were talking about Mumia a lot. And we spoke about Assange the very next day when they did the speech at the border. They made sure to include Julian Assange, and we had some talks about Julian Assange. There was also a lot of talks from anarchists down there. The whole movement is kind of unique right now because it's not just about communism and socialism. People are talking about anarchism down there, which is very, very important as well. So, I mean, there's definitely a group of ideas going down. And I got to tell you, one thing I didn't mention too is like when you go to the global South and you go to these countries, it's important to talk to everybody. Part of the delegations, you're going to meet all these people, all these activists, all these victims who've lost family members and whatnot from what was going on, the murder squads in Colombia. But me and Fiorella are making a point to talk to the cab drivers, to talk to the waiters, to talk to the bartenders, to talk to everybody, get a feel about what's really going on. And we always tend to ask about Julian Assange, and a lot of people know, and they understand how the importance of Julian Assange and why him being tortured today and possibly extradited to the United States is just horrific.
Well said. Well, Pasta, thank you so much for coming on and educating all of us and setting the record straight there.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Sabrina. Really, I mean, it means the world to me, Sabby. I was like, I don't think I've been this excited for an interview in a while. I really wanted to talk about this, and I really wanted to talk about it with you. I occasionally get a chance when I'm not doing my work to listen on to what you and RBN are doing. And I look forward to having some more conversations down the road with you and your crew. And I think it's important to have like these conversations where everybody might not be on the same page or have different ideas, but come up with new ideas and find a way forward together.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Talk to you later. All right, guys. Welcome, welcome. Very educational there, I have to say. All right, guys. What are we going to talk about tonight? Let me go ahead and share my thumbnail here. All right. Tonight, we're talking about Joe Rogan Uvalde issue. What's happening there? What happened on his podcast in reference to the Uvalde police? I also have an update about that situation as well. I'm also going to talk about Andrew Gillum indicted. Yikes. Guys, it is not good news. And I'm also going to discuss Apple Union. Is it possible? What happened in Maryland? I'm going to get into that story. And of course, Pasta was just here to educate us about the elections in Colombia. Going to go to some super chats really quick. Shout out to Meteor Dreams. So glad you brought Pasta on. He knows what he's talking about regarding this, unlike transphobic, homophobic Jackson Hinkle. Okay. I have not seen that from Jackson, but that's interesting. Thanks for the super chat. JB, my comrades here in the chat. Hello, Pasta. I can't wait to have you on my channel. Shout out to Oz. Thanks for the super chat. Thanks for having Pasta on. He needs to get out more. Woo woo. Shout out to AJF. Thanks for the super chat. Any Fed to state government ID should be enough to vote. And thank you for this super chat as well. I'd campaign to ban any corporation from any means of contributing to elections. Of course, we need Rich Citizens United undone to make sure of this. Yes. That's something we need to bring back up again. It was talked about more when Bernie Sanders was running, but I think we need to start talking about that more again, about Citizens United. And thank you for this super chat as well. Advice, vote on policy, not your feelings, please. Yes. Please, if you are going to vote, please don't fall in love with the personality. Please focus on the issues. And thank you for this super chat as well. The left can gain much electoral support in the USA via economical speech/stance. Talk about down-to-earth budget issues. Avoid the academic left talk. Aha, yes. I agree. You really have to just talk to people like in a normal way. Like, it's true. Like, sometimes the elite academic rhetoric, I know this because I used to work with faculty for years. Sometimes, like, your everyday average Joe Schmo, they just want you to get straight to the point. They don't want you to use all this academic jargon. You can lose people like that, actually. Shout out to everyone who is a Sabby patron. I really do appreciate all of your support. You guys don't know how much you mean to me. If you're interested in becoming a Sabby patron, I have 5 categories: members, Sabby, Sabsters, Sabinators, and Ultimate. All of their names are listed here. Thank you guys so much. It really does go a long way. For people who don't know, I have to pay for all these services that I use. So thank you so much. And their names are also scrolling across the bottom of the screen. All right, so let's go ahead and get into our next story. Andrew Gillum. Where do I begin? I'm actually going to start with a debate. I want to remind you who he is. Andrew Gillum ran against Ron DeSantis. That was actually a very close race. It was a gubernatorial race. I actually thought he was going to win. It was close. He was great in the debates. Long story short, he went on to lose. And apparently, after he lost that election, Andrew Gillum actually went into a downward spiral. He talked about this himself in other interviews. There was an incident where he was found at a hotel room. There was drugs involved, alcohol. There was a prostitute there. I'm not going to get into all of it, but then he came back into the limelight again because of that incident. And of course, there was the interview that followed that incident on Tamron Hall's show. His wife was in that interview as well. And I got to be honest with you, I remember watching that interview and just feeling some kind of way about his wife. I was just like, I wonder how she feels. I wonder how she really feels, not what she's telling the interviewer. Now, Andrew Gillum is back in the news again, and it's not good news. But I want to take you back first to remind you who Andrew Gillum is and when he really pretty much entered our radar. This was a debate that he had between Ron DeSantis.
Congressman DeSantis, Florida is still recovering from the devastating impact of Hurricane Michael, with at least 26 Floridians killed. There is scientific consensus that warmer waters from climate change are making hurricanes stronger, as well as a stark warning that the world just received from the United Nations about climate change. You recently said that you're not a climate change believer. I'm sorry, you're not a climate change denier, but you don't want to be labeled a believer in climate change. Given the threats Florida faces from intense hurricanes and rising sea levels, don't Florida voters deserve to know where you stand on this issue?
Well, what I said was I don't want to be an alarmist. I mean, I want to look at this and do what makes sense for Florida. So, for example, for the people in Northwest Florida, I will be there for you. You guys are resilient. You're fighting. This was a terrible storm, and we will rebuild. But I also think you have to just look at facts. The fact is, you look at South Florida, we need to do resiliency. You have more water. You have flooding. So as governor, that's something that I'm going to take on full throttle. What I don't want to do is do what things like Andrew wants to do, which is do a California-style energy policy that will cause our electricity rates to skyrocket 20, 30%. That's going to hurt senior citizens on a fixed income. That'll hurt our blue-collar workers. So let's deal with the issues that we can deal with. I'm somebody who has a plan to fix, to stop the toxic algae that's been spewing into our rivers, to divert that south of the lake, restore the Everglades, and restore Florida Bay. We can get that done. I think I'm the candidate that can get that done. And I think now's the time to do it, because if we don't take action over the next 4 years, I don't know if we're ever going to be able to restore the Everglades to their rightful place.
Mayor,
Before I go on, if there's anyone in the chat that lives in South Florida, have these things happened? Let me know in the chat. I'm just curious if he's done what he said he was going to do.
Gillum?
Well, first, what Florida voters need to know is that when they elect me governor, they're going to have a governor who believes in science, which we haven't had for quite some time in this state. I'm not sure what is so California about believing that the state of Florida ought to lead in solar energy. We're known as the Sunshine State. At the very least, what we can do is be a global leader here. We got to teach the other 49 states of what to do and what it means to have a state that, quite frankly, leans into the challenges of the green economy and builds one, and at the same time builds an economy that lasts. I'm proud that the same week that Donald Trump pulled out of the Paris Accord, I broke ground in my city on a 120-acre solar farm, tripling the amount of solar energy that we produce. We're prepared to lead, and we've done so in my city, and we'll do so for the state.
Congressman.
Okay. The reason why I wanted to show you that is because I wanted to remind you the Andrew Gillum that we were introduced to, who seems to be different today. People change, they go through things in life. Someone mentioned in the chat he was charismatic. Yeah, he was. So what's happening with Andrew Gillum now? And I told you what happened. After he lost the election, he entered a downward spiral. Those were his words, not mine. He really took that loss really hard. That can happen to anyone. And apparently, I guess he fell back into addiction. So he had addiction problems before. I'm not sure if he was able to curb those addictions while he was running, but he did say that he fell back into addiction after that. But what I'm about to show you right now really has nothing to do with his addiction. This is about campaign fraud. And so I want to go ahead and show you this, and then I'm going to go into an article that has a little bit more detail, because I hate to say it, but this right here is a slap in the face for the Democratic Party. It really is. Let's go into this story.
Andrew Gillum, a once rising Florida Democratic star, has been indicted alongside one of his longtime advisors for alleged fraud tied to his campaign against Governor Ron DeSantis. The 21-count indictment includes 1 count of lying to the FBI, 1 count of conspiracy to commit mail fraud, and 19 counts of wire fraud. In an earlier statement to NBC News, Gillum acknowledged the case but denied any wrongdoing, saying, quote, "Every campaign I've run has been done with integrity. Make no mistake that this case is not legal. It is political." In just a few moments, Gillum and his advisor, Sharon Letterman Hicks, are scheduled to make their first court appearance in Tallahassee.
Okay. Now, that was a brief summary of that. I do want to get into more details because it's more than just that. So let me go ahead and pull up this article for you here. And here we go. Former Florida gubernatorial candidate Andrew Gillum indicted on wire fraud charges. Here we go. Once rising Democratic star who nearly won a 2018 race for Florida governor was indicted on Wednesday along with a close political ally on charges of conspiracy, wire fraud, and making false statements. This is a big deal, you guys. Gillum pled not guilty during a brief appearance at the United States Courthouse in Tallahassee. The trial date is set for August 16th, so that's actually just around the corner. A 26-page grand jury indictment unsealed Wednesday alleges Gillum and longtime associate Sharon Janet Letman Hicks engaged in a years-long scheme to turn political donations and grant funds into personal income. Now, let me just pop out for a second, and I want to say something, and I'll go back in. Based on what they're telling you right now, I'm just going to go ahead and tell you guys, he would have not been indicted if they did not have enough evidence. They must have found enough to indict him. These are the kind of things where they have receipts. And I don't know why it took them this long. I mean, it's been a couple of years since 2018. I don't know why it took them this long to find this information, but they found it now. So here we go. Gillum is also accused of lying to the FBI during an investigation into corruption inside Tallahassee City Hall, where Gillum served as mayor. So I do want to remind all of you, remember, he was already mayor first and is accused of promising political favors to those who financially supported him. Well, that just sounds like two-party corruption, guys. I told you it's a corrupt system. Gillum and Letman Hicks face 21 charges. According to the news release, making a false statement carries a prison sentence up to 5 years, while the maximum prison term for wire fraud and conspiracy charges are up to 20 years. Here's the statement. I've spent the last 20 years of my life in public service and continue to fight for the people. Every campaign I've run has been done with integrity. Make no mistake that this case is not legal, it's political. Throughout my career, I have always stood up for the people of Florida and have spoken truth to power. Apparently, I didn't realize this, but Gillum is also a former CNN political commentator, so that's interesting as well. What is it with the people coming out of CNN? Very wrong. Very weird. The indictment is the latest downturn in the descent of someone who was once one of the Democratic Party's fastest rising politicians. Gillum rose to national prominence in 2018 as the first Black nominee for governor in Florida history, but spiraled after losing to Republican Ron DeSantis that November by less than 33,000 votes. So when I tell you guys that race was close, that race was really close. I remember that one. His star crashed in March 2020 when police responding to a possible overdose call said they found Gillum in a motel room with a bag of crystal meth and a collapsed companion. Gillum later entered rehab. I want to comment about that for just a second. During that process, when that information came out, the other thing, all of a sudden now, Andrew Gillum had to tell people about his sexuality. And this is one of those things, I tell you guys, like, this is why some people do not want to run for office, because they really get so deep into your personal life, and not just your personal life, but your family members as well. So whatever you do in private can still come out to the light. Do I think it's any of our business about his sexuality? No. Do I think it's any of our business to go and ask his wife if she knew about this? No. What does that have to do with him doing his job? I don't think that's our business. But this is what happens when you run for office. They dig into everything. So you got to think about some of the things that happened. After that came out, he had to admit to everyone that he was bisexual. Again, I don't think that was any of our business. because the companion was a male companion. So he had to explain that. Then he had to explain about cheating on his wife with his wife in the interview with him with Tamron Hall. I just felt like this is so embarrassing. Like, I felt embarrassed for them. I really did, watching the interview. Then he also had to explain why he had drugs there. So then he had to mention the fact that, oh, by the way, I also have this addiction problem that I've had for years. Everything that I just told you, with the exception of the prostitute, his wife was aware of. She was aware of the fact he had an addiction. She was also aware of the fact that he was bisexual. So to that point, I just kind of say, why was that really our business? Why did he have to come forward and explain those things? But they told him that he had to. That's the thing about running for office. And I want you to keep in mind, when this incident happened, he was no longer running for office. This was just like a year or two, like 2 or 3 years ago. He wasn't even running at that point, and they still told him he had to come forward and explain himself. So that's the thing about being a politician. The allegations in the indictment span Gillum's rise as Tallahassee mayor through his campaign for governor. So it actually started when he was mayor, and his political work after his defeat. According to the indictment, starting in 2016, Gillum and Letterman Hicks repeatedly used entities one of the other controlled to solicit donations that would later go towards personal use. And see, this is why things like this is why people don't want to donate money to politicians. And I told you guys this before. Bernie Sanders received over $100 million from the people, from us. What happened to all that money? He didn't win. So where did it all go? But this is going to be an example that people are going to point to, and this is bad for the Democratic Party. And also doesn't make Stacey Abrams look too good either now, does it? Because she was heavily, supporting Andrew Gillum. So this is one of those things. This is why people don't want to give them their money. On several occasions, money donated to those entities found its way to a media consulting company owned by Letterman Hicks, which she then fraudulently provided to Gillum for his personal use, disguised as payroll payments. In one example, Gillum and Letterman Hicks allegedly steered $250,000 campaign contribution into a separate 501c4 organization managed by an acquaintance who Gillum and Letterman Hicks could control. Then they attempted to conceal the fraud, including by filing fraudulent paperwork. And this is all according to the indictment. Like I told you, it goes deeper than just that little video I showed you. Here we go. Letterman Hicks is listed as the CEO of the National Black Justice Coalition, an LGBTQ advocacy group, and is candidate for state representative. So here we have this person who was working with him that got served this indictment with him. They're now running for office. Surprise. So much corruption. So much good. You can't trust it. You can't trust it. So here we go. She had been described as a mentor to Gillum, and two have worked close together since Gillum's first campaign for Tallahassee City Commissioner 2 decades ago. In 2019, Gillum started a new business, CJD Group, LLC. Letterman Hicks was listed on the company's registration documents filed with the state. This goes deep, you guys. This goes deep. Here's another one. In 2019, a leaked federal grand jury subpoena first suggested investigators were reviewing the ties between Gillum and Letterman Hicks. The subpoena, first reported by the Tampa Bay Times, was asking an associate to turn over documents related to Letterman Hicks, Gillum, his gubernatorial campaign, and other organizations tied to both individuals. By the end of the year, a political committee that was supposed to fund Gillum's future political endeavors had spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on legal expenses. So this happened in 2019. So that goes to show you, even after he lost in 2018, he was still planning on running for something again, because they said future political endeavors. I wonder what he was going to run for. We may never know. It's like that commercial, you guys. What was the commercial? How many licks does it take to get to the center of a Tootsie Roll Pop? The world may never know. Okay, more information I want to give to you here. Come down here. Gillum has for years faced rumors that the FBI was encircling his political activity. His campaign for governor was dogged by a sprawling federal probe into Tallahassee City Hall that revealed Gillum had accepted Broadway tickets to the musical Hamilton and other perks from an undercover FBI agent posing as a developer. Why did it have to be Hamilton? Why? Sorry, guys. He ultimately settled a state ethics investigation by paying a $5,000 fine. So these issues go, they've had issues with him for a while, you guys. They've had issues with him for a while. Listen to this part. Even amid his legal troubles, Gillum had for a time maintained his newfound national standing after his defeat. CNN hired him as a political commentator, and Harvard University plucked him to be a guest lecturer. He became a sounding board for 2020 Democratic presidential hopefuls who were eager to earn the endorsement of the young Black leader. After his 2020 run-in with the police in South Florida, Gillum disappeared for a time. He announced that he would enter rehab, saying in a statement, "I will be stepping down from all public-facing roles for the foreseeable future." This goes into that interview I was telling you about, but his exit from the spotlight was brief. In a revealing interview later in 2020 with television host Tamron Hall, Gillum shared his substance abuse troubles after losing to DeSantis. He also said that he identifies as bisexual. That's that interview that I was telling you about that I saw. Later, Gillum hosted a podcast in which he interviewed prominent progressives and Black thought leaders. He recently posted a discussion with LaFonza Butler, the president of abortion rights group Emily's List. Andrew Gillum is another example that Democrats are just as corrupt as Republicans. Now, you see, it seems like for years they were looking into his finances. For years they were. When the FBI comes knocking at your door, something is not right. And he's not the only one. Right now, Henry Cuellar, who just won his race, he won the recount against Jessica Cisneros last night, by the way. He just won that race. I want to remind you that the FBI raided his home in January. Whoopsie. And he's going into Congress, going back. And that's who Nancy Pelosi and Jim Clyburn went to Texas to endorse. The pro-life candidate whose home had just been raided by the FBI. He's still under investigation from what I understand. So that should be interesting. I'm going to go to some of these comments here. Let's go ahead and grab the ones on Rockfin, Eric. And I'll come back to Andrew Gillum because I got a couple more things to say. Roger Meadows. Thank you for the tips on Rockfin, Roger Meadows. I came on late. I heard Pasta said, make it easier to get voter ID. That is what I've been saying for the longest. I have nothing against voter ID, but if they're going to make it hard to get the ID, like relocating DMVs out of the community where you have to travel across the state in unwelcome territory, getting harassed by cops and others is not good. Or they not close, or if they're not close, but shrink the number of DMVs, causing some bottlenecking caused when you have to go to DMVs across the state, with stretching them beyond their capacity since they are used to serving the local population, or with limiting their hours and days they can be open. Also, Craig, I was about to say this as, now, Craig, you guys remember that from the movie Friday? Now, Craig, don't get yourself in any trouble out there with your auntie and your uncle. Dad, I'm grown. Okay, we'll send you grown. don't bring your black ass back home. And then it starts, you can do it, put your back into it. Okay, sorry, going back into this. Also, Craig, I experienced mail-in ballot for the first time in 2020. I felt it was the greatest thing because often most of the people on the ballot, not only have you never heard of, but you are not even familiar with the position they're running for. That's a lot of pressure to put us in with this in-person voting. Yet with mail-in, I get to take my time and I do a little research on them where I can stretch this out over a week or more, eliminating that I am being put back under the gun just to vote. I don't know who these people are. Thank you for this tip on Rockfin, Lady Alex. US out of fill in the blank. And thank you for these tips as well, Roger Meadows. Only way to force voters to vote on the issues, not their feelings, for a candidate is to put a ballot initiative before them. Ballot initiatives have no scandals, no personality. You won't find it in someone's wife tied up in a Brooklyn basement, blindfolded with pictures taken for blackmail purposes, nor find it being accused of having an affair with their secretary. Body slamming reporters. No personal life. Don't require you to run for office. Just policy. Thank you for this tip, Dave Burt. Thanks for bringing Pasta on. He's unorthodox, but it makes him great journalist. Agree on using political labels out of academic talk. You lose people too fast and then they're gone. He pitched Libertarian Party. I'm not against libertarians, but the more organized ones that go into government, some are okay, but others can be bad, eccentric, individual, and conservative in bad ways. Thank you so much for those tips on Rockfin. All right. Abington71 said Corn Pop was an extra on Friday too. Oh boy. Oh gosh. Now, Craig. All right. Let me go ahead to some of these comments as well. Thank you for the super chat, Ashura. If Andrew wanted money, he should have just joined BLM. Damn. Thanks for the super chat as well. When is Hillary coming out of the woods for Andrew? Yikes. This is an embarrassment to the Democratic Party. I'm telling you. Oh boy. Thank you for this one as well. Andrew should. He's being persecuted because he's bi. Oh man. And thanks for this one. If only Andrew wasn't seen with HRC and torch Medicare for all. Thank you for the super sticker, Abingding71. Yes, this is very unfortunate. You know, I just don't think Andrew Gillum he's just not having a good, the past couple of years for him have not been good. Let me just put it that way. They have not been good. I do know that he also mentioned on Tamar Hall's show that when he also lost that election, he was also feeling suicidal. So I sincerely hope that he doesn't go back into that mindset again after what just came out now. But the Democratic Party, man, you guys got a way to pick them. You got a way to pick them because they were looking into information about him going back to when he was mayor. So going back to 2016, but that's the one you guys were pushing out to the people. So what can I say? What can I say? And I'm sure he's not the only one. I'm sure there are more. I want to go ahead and go into the next story. Let's go ahead and get into this. So Joe Rogan is coming under fire again. Surprise, surprise. Apparently, he had a guest on his podcast recently, and he was talking about the Uvalde shooting and the police situation there. I'm going to tell you new information about that as well. And apparently, some of the things that were said on his show, people are not happy with. But I do want to first start with an update. So what is now happening with the police in Uvalde? What new information has come out? Let me show you this video from Fox and Friends first. Shout out to Case Study QB. They're going to give their opinion about this here, what they think should happen to those police officers. So again, Case Study's always doing great work. Let's hear what they had to say. And then I have an article I'm going to show you to give you more detailed update about what they found out now about those police officers.
You're from Texas. The story of Uvalde, Texas is so heartbreaking. And yesterday, it turns out, as we heard from the top cop down in Texas, that apparently They could have stopped it 3 minutes after it started. Instead, it went on for over an hour, and all those kids were killed, and those adults as well.
It's sad. This police chief, which refused to cooperate with the Texas Rangers, he's lying. There's video surveillance of him requesting his rifle and his radio. He didn't even bring his radio to the scene. You have a law enforcement community where their kids were in that building. You had a law enforcement officer, that wife died in one of those classrooms. They took his gun away and detained him. I mean, it's just a cluster. You know what happened. It's an embarrassment to the state of Texas. He should lose his badge. He should be jailed for what he did, because there were laws and procedures put in place after Columbine, and he refused to do it. He also lied, and his cop lied and said he engaged with the subject, and he did not engage with the subject. There's been so many missteps and lies going on there. It's very shameful.
Well, and there have been so many wrong stories. Apparently, you know, we heard that story about the door being locked. The door wasn't locked.
The door wasn't locked.
They apparently didn't close right. And had it not been for that Border Patrol SWAT guy who just said, I'm not waiting for you guys, and went in and killed the guy.
It was the Bortec unit, and you know, we were down on the ground doing the reporting, and we were getting information from the preliminary investigation before they gave their sworn statements to the Texas Rangers. They were telling the Rangers one thing, and of course my sources within the department were giving me that information. They were giving it to the governor as well, and they changed it when it was time for the official statement, because then it was under oath. So, I mean, these are just blatant lies that are happening right now. It's sad, because those kids deserve better. Those teachers deserve better. And if you have teachers that are using their body as human shield, the police chief should have been able to make the call. Officers go in. There was a lot of cops outside of that classroom, as you can hear in the audio, that wanted to go in, but this guy said no.
Apparently, this guy was waiting for a key, and the classroom door wasn't even locked.
And even if he was waiting for the key, you're over the police department for the school district. You don't have a key to the building? You don't have a key to the door? It just makes zero sense.
0 cents. Heartbreaking.
Huh. You know, it's really interesting. Seems to be a little bit of hypocrisy here. Now all of a sudden, Fox News is willing to admit when the police are at fault. But they don't seem to be willing to do that when the police are caught on camera killing an unarmed black man. Anybody notice that? They make excuses for the police when those incidents happen. When George Floyd, they made excuses for the police. They demonize George Floyd. And I don't really care. I don't want to care about what he did in the past. Doesn't matter. No one deserved to have that happen to them. And what did the police say during the Derek Chauvin trial? No, he did not follow protocol. And they were still trying to find a way to defend him. So the level of hypocrisy is just interesting to me. It is interesting. I want to go into more detail about what they found out now about the Uvalde police, because that's a little bit of a summary of it. I do have an article here. I have two of them. Oh, I think that's the same one. Let me show you this one first. So there's a picture here. This is inside the school. Okay. Now you can see there are two police officers here. It looks like there's another one right behind them and one over here to the right. It says video footage recorded inside Robb Elementary School in Uvalde at 12:04 p.m. May 24th. Authorities stormed the classroom at 12:50 p.m. Let me say this again. The video footage recorded inside of the school at 12:04 p.m. Authorities stormed the classroom at 12:50 p.m. So obviously later on. Let's go into this article here, because there's something here that I do want to point out and make this a little bit larger. If there's kids in there, we need to go in. Officers in Uvalde were ready with guns, shields, and tools, but not clear on orders. So obviously, there was a miscommunication problem. The Texas Tribune has reviewed law enforcement transcripts and footage that federal and state investigators are examining after May 24th tragedy. I do want to show you this picture again. As you can see, for people who are saying they didn't have the equipment, they didn't have the tools, they were not armed, what do you see right here in this picture? For people who were saying, oh, they only had handguns, does that look like a handgun to you? Last time I checked, that doesn't look like a handgun. They also had shields. This guy has a helmet. So that's that. Now let's go further into the article here. Make this larger because this is tiny. Okay. The officers in the hallway of Robb Elementary wanted to get inside the classrooms immediately. One officer's daughter was inside. Another officer had gotten a call from his wife, a teacher, who told him she was bleeding to death. Two closed doors and a wall stood between them and an 18-year-old with an AR-15 who had opened fire on children and teachers inside the connected classrooms. A Halligan bar, an axe-like forcible entry tool used by firefighters to get through the locked doors, was available. So for the people who keep coming back telling me they didn't have any tools, they had tools. Let's go back in. Shrink myself. Ballistic shields were arriving on the scene. So was plenty of firepower, including at least 2 rifles. Some officers were itching to move. One such officer, a special agent at Texas Department of Public Safety, had arrived around 20 minutes after the shooting started. He immediately asked, "Are there still kids in the classrooms? If there is, then they just need to go in." Another officer answered, "It is unknown at this time." What do you mean it's unknown? The agent shot back, "Y'all don't know if there's kids in there? If there's kids in there, we need to go in there. Whoever is in charge will determine that." So, first of all, how do you not know if there? Of course you knew there were children in there. The kids weren't outside. Oh boy. Oh boy. I get heated thinking about this one. This is ridiculous. He went on to say, "Well, there's kids over here, so I'm getting kids out." The exchange happened early in the excruciating 77 minutes on May 24th that started when Salvador Ramos, who had just shot his grandmother in the face, walked through an unlocked door of Robb Elementary. So I want to remind everybody again, remember the police chief initially said that the door was locked. I just want to let you know that was not true. It came out later on that that door was not locked. They were cowards. Encountering no interference as he wielded an AR-15 he had bought 8 days earlier. Let me go down here because this is where I want to show you the update. Here are some key findings from these records and materials. No security footage from inside the school showed police officers attempting to open the doors to the classrooms 111 and 112. I want to say this again. There was no security footage from inside the school that showed that these police officers attempted to open the door, even though they claimed that they did. So that was a lie. Here we go. Arredondo told the Tribune that he tried to open one door and another group of officers tried to open another, but the door was reinforced and impenetrable. Those attempts were not caught in the footage reviewed by the Tribune. Some law enforcement officials are skeptical that the doors were ever locked. Here's another update. Within the first few minutes of the law enforcement response, an officer said Halligan, a firefighting tool that is also sometimes spelled hooligan, was on site. It wasn't brought into the school until an hour after the first officers entered the building. Authorities didn't use it and instead waited for keys. So here they go. They had a tool here that they could have used to get into the building and they chose not to use that tool, they decided to wait for keys instead. Again, they were cowards. Here's the other update. Officers had access to 4 ballistic shields inside the school during the standoff with the gunman, according to a law enforcement transcript. The first arrived 58 minutes before officers stormed the classrooms. The last arrived 30 minutes before. Here's another update. Multiple Department of Public Safety officers, up to 8 at one point, entered the building at various times while the shooter was hauled up. Many quickly left to pursue other duties, including evacuating children after seeing the number of officers already there. At least one of the officers expressed confusion and frustration about why the officers weren't breaching the classroom, but was told that no order to do so had been given. Now, who would that order have come from? The police chief, right? Most likely. So the police chief did not order them to go in. All of these men should be fired. None of them should be able to keep their jobs. They're proving to you that they don't feel comfortable enough to go out there and fight for you. All of them should be removed. That's how I feel about that situation. Now, one more update. At least some officers on the scene seem to believe that Arredondo was in charge inside the school. And at times, Arredondo seemed to be issuing orders, such as directing officers to evacuate students from other classrooms. That contradicts Arredondo's assertion that he did not believe he was running the law enforcement response. Arredondo's lawyer, George E. Hyde, said the chief will not elaborate on his interview with the Tribune, given the ongoing investigation. I'm not going to read the entire article. It is rather lengthy. Eric, if you don't mind, could you put the link to that article in the chat? I put it there twice for some reason. Now, what happened to the Joe Rogan one? Oh, I'll put that back up there. Before I show you the clip from Joe Rogan, I just want to remind you of something that comes from Barnes Law about the police protecting you. Now, this mentions 2 different cases that happened where the people involved felt like the police did not do their job in protecting them. There's one part here that I want to mention. Let me go a little bit further down. Actually, this needs to be larger. Okay. This case in particular, and you can give people the link to this one too, Eric, because they might want to read this one. There was a case called DeShaney versus Winnebago County. Now, this was in 1989. The U.S. Supreme Court held that the failure by the government workers to protect someone, even a 4-year-old Joshua DeShaney, from physical violence or harm from another person, his father, did not breach any substantive constitutional duty. In this case in particular, Joshua's mother sued the Winnebago County Department of Social Services, alleging it deprived Joshua of his liberty interests in bodily integrity, in violation of his rights under the substantive component of the 14th Amendment due process clause. By failing to intervene to protect him against his father's violence, while the department took various steps to protect Joshua after receiving numerous complaints of the abuse, the department took no actions to remove Joshua from his father's custody. Joshua became comatose and extremely retarded due to traumatic head injuries inflicted by his father, who physically beat him over a long period of time. Now, this is the part I really want you to pay attention to. Nevertheless, the court, and they mean the Supreme Court, the court found that the government had no affirmative duty to protect any person, even a child, from harm by another person. Nothing in the language of the Due Process Clause itself requires the state to protect the life, liberty, and property of its citizens against invasion by private actors. That was stated by Chief Justice Rehnquist for the majority. Even when such aid may be necessary to secure life, liberty, or property interests of which the government itself may not deprive the individual without due process of law. So down here, they give another case example, Castle Rock versus Gonzalez. This was another case where, again, the U.S. Supreme Court again ruled that the police did not have a constitutional duty to protect a person from harm. I'm going to say this one more time. I want everybody to remember this. The U.S. Supreme Court ruled that the police did not have a constitutional duty to protect a person from harm. This came from the U.S. Supreme Court. Now, the case Castle Rock versus Gonzalez, that was in 2005. Guys, that wasn't that long ago. Even in 2005, the Supreme Court says, again, the police did not have a constitutional duty to protect a person from harm. And if that is the case, if that is the ruling from the Supreme Court, there's multiple cases in this document where they go over this, the same issue. Then why on earth are the police here? What are they here to do? If it's not their job to protect you, and we know they only solve 0.02% of crime, then what is the role of the police in the United States? Someone tell me, give me an answer, because this doesn't make any sense. So I want you to share this with your friends. I want you to share this article with your family members, because I want them to know that according to the United States Supreme Court, the police do not have a duty to protect you. Pass this on to as many people as possible. Now, why did I bring this up? Look at what just happened in Uvalde. You see, the police, they didn't protect the kids. They claim they didn't have orders. This story has changed over the past couple of days. It just keeps changing. But at the end of the day, do not be surprised if those police officers are not held accountable. And the reason why I say that is because if you go back to the ruling from the Supreme Court, they're telling you themselves they don't have a constitutional duty to protect you from harm. Now, where does Joe Rogan fit in? Let me go ahead and grab that. Oh, that's the Apple one. I think I forgot to put it here. Eric, that's on me. That's okay. I'll grab it. I'm going to show you where Joe Rogan fits in all of this, because where did it go? Sorry, I have so many articles here. Here it is. I think I forgot to put this link on there, Eric. That's my bad. All right. Let's see what happened on Joe Rogan's podcast. I want you to remember everything that I just showed you and that Supreme Court article. And now I also want to show you what was said on his show and why people have a problem with it. Pause. Thank you. Okay, let me hop to the back. Listen to what his guest says on his show.
So why is it so hard to get something implemented like a rigorous training course?
I think it's ignorance. I think the first thing is society, culture right now. We've been emasculating the law enforcement for a while. You know,
I'm gonna stop it there for a second to let you know what they're talking about is the Uvalde police, the situation that happened. So Joe Rogan is saying that why can't they get some type of training program in place so that something like this doesn't happen again? Oh, Joe Rogan. That's what he's saying. That's why this subject is coming up. Listen to what he says.
we want a kinder, softer, gentler, and I get they're dealing with mental health, and we can have specialists that can come in and deal with somebody having a mental health crisis, but we still need men and women that will run towards the sound of gunfire and know what to do.
Yeah.
And we don't right now. We have been weakening them, and we have been making them ill-equipped to respond to that. And then I think Uvalde is a great example of not properly trained with broken systems that are not ready to do the right thing.
Okay, let's go ahead and debunk that right now. So he talks about, by the way, that was in reference to defunding the police too. That was another thing that came up, that defunding the police is the reason why these police officers are not trained and they're not equipped. But let's go back to what I just showed you a couple of minutes ago. Again, in reference to Uvalde. Look at this picture. They damn well look equipped to me. They have shields. They have stronger artillery here. They look equipped to me. And I also told you in this article, what did they say that they had? They told them that they had the forcible entry tool, the Halligan bar right here to open the doors. They had ballistic shields. They had rifles. They had plenty of firepower. All of this is here in the article. So the gentleman, the guest that was on Joe Rogan's show, I don't know if he saw this information or not, but what happened in Uvalde with those police officers had nothing to do with defunding the police and everything to do with the fact that, again, going back to that article that I showed you about the ruling the U.S. Supreme Court made, they do not have a constitutional duty to protect you. The defund movement had nothing to do with the way that those police officers responded. Police, they've been giving the police more money, you guys. Joe Biden has been giving them more money. They've been funding the police more. That started last year, and they're still giving them more money. This has nothing to do with defunding the police. This has everything to do with the fact what I just showed you in that U.S. Supreme Court ruling, and also the fact that these officers were cowards. If you can sit there and you can let kids get murdered because you're more concerned about yourself, then don't be a police officer. Not everyone can be a cop. I said this before. My dad will tell you. My dad's ex-military. He'll tell you, not everybody can be in the military. It is not for everyone. So if that is you and you don't want to do that, and you don't want to go in and do what you need to do and rescue kids, adults, whoever, take the badge off and go home. Don't do the job. Don't do it. So a lot of people, this was on Twitter and other social media platforms as well. A lot of people are really angry with Joe Rogan because of that. Now, granted, that's his guest talking, but I really want someone to, rather maybe Nick, my comrade Nick from RBN, I really want someone to go onto Joe Rogan's podcast and really educate him about the defund movement and educate him about policing in the United States, because I don't think he really understands. When you make those comments and you say, oh, well, they need to have better training and da-da-da. It's not about that. You can have the best training in the world. That doesn't stop the police officers from being assholes. All my life, this is what I've seen with law enforcement. There are some good cops, but the system itself is absolutely corrupt. They have qualified immunity. No one has ended that. They know they can get away with it. So there's that. That's a problem that has to go. It's terrible. And I've heard him make these talking points on his podcast before about the police. He does not know what he's talking about when it comes to defunding the police. And I want to let you guys know, I'm trying to get them to come on hopefully soon. My old town here in Massachusetts, I used to live in Somerville, Massachusetts. I lived there for a couple of years. Guess what they just did? They just defunded the police. The activists did that. So what you got to understand is they were giving more and more money to these cops, but I'm glad that they were able to do that in Somerville. They didn't need all that money. So it needed to happen. It needed to happen. But this is a situation where they had the tools. So I want people to stop saying they didn't have any tools. They had the tools. They had shields. They had artillery. They had what they needed to do to go in and save those kids, and they still chose not to. Now they say they were waiting for, direction from police chief. The police chief still didn't even tell them to go. This is a lost cause. When I see an interview with the lieutenant telling the news crew that, listen, yeah, if those officers would have went in, they could have been hurt. They could have been injured. That right there lets you know what it's all about. It was about them protecting themselves and saving themselves. That's what this is about. If you don't have the guts to go in and save a child, then maybe you should not be a police officer. Case in point. I'm going to go to some of these comments and then I'll go to my last story here. I have some good news for this last story. Thank you for the super chat, Ashura. Is that not the brother who tried to defend cops? Oh boy. Sebastian says police equal property protection of the rich. Exactly. They protect capital. AJF, thanks for the super chat. They're paying more attention to what happens badly to white rich people more than non-white poor folks is what I call my theory of cultural inertia. Bam. Yes, true. Thank you for the super chat as well, AJF. Cultural inertia example, media tending to look into the background and history of poor people and not politicians, police, and those in corporate America. Bingo. Chris says the Supreme Court defends corporations, not the rule of law. Which corporations and ruling elites tell their puppets in Washington to pass? Isn't that crazy? Kitty loves films. Thank you, Sabby, for being level-headed. I'm at a loss for words. I'm feeling rage. Yeah, you guys, pass that article on to as many people as possible. Eric, if you can put that one about the Supreme Court ruling in the chat. Most people that I've spoken to do not know about that. Thank you for the super chat, AJF. I wonder, do the police have a constitutional right to protect property then? LOL. Ah, good question. And thank you for the super chat, Ashura. Hey, Sabby, have really dumb guy in your show or RBN. Who is really dumb guy? What's that? What's happening? I don't know who that is. I don't know what that is about. Yeah. So the police, they don't protect you. See? I'm going to end with some good news tonight. Good news. I want to give a shout out to Apple employees in Maryland, my birth state. Shout out. Thank you so much for this case study, QB. Otherwise, I probably would have found out about this pretty late. I am new to this information. The case study just posted this recently. Apple workers in Maryland store vote to unionize. I want to let you know that as of today, no Apple store was unionized. Now they have one. Let's stand in solidarity with the Apple employees because this is going to cause a wave, right? Apple has plenty of money. They can do more for these employees. Let's hear what they had to say. Let's go into it.
All right, you don't hear this every day. A company that generously pays its workers, in fact, double the industry average, all of a sudden gets unionized, or at least a core store does in Maryland. And that has people saying, wait a minute, didn't this just recently happen to Amazon in New York and a host of other big players like Starbucks that are facing almost a brush fire, this type of activity? Let's get the latest from Connell McShane on where this is going. Hey, Connell.
Yeah, it's interesting. Hey, Neil, not only do we not hear it every day, in Apple's case, we've never heard it before at all. I mean, an Apple retail location voting to join a union for the first time ever. There are just over 100 people who work at this particular Apple store in Towson, Maryland. It's inside a mall right near Baltimore, and they voted 60.
My birthplace, by the way. I know exactly where that mall is located.
5 to 33 in favor of joining the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, the group behind the push, tweeting out, "We did it, Towson. We won our union vote." No comment from Apple on all this, but we do actually have a comment in today from the President of the United States.
I'm proud of it. Look, you know, workers have a right to determine under what conditions they're going to work or not work.
Apple, to Neil's point, does pay its retail employees in the U.S. at least $22 an hour. Some workers, though, have been asking for even more than that. And, you know, the bigger story at all of this might be still to come. There are other Apple stores around the country and keeping a very close eye on Maryland. And, for example, there are 2 higher volume locations, both here in New York City, that have signaled they may follow. They haven't set a vote yet. One of them is right in Grand Central Station. The other's down at the World Trade Center. And there's also a store in Atlanta that was supposed to have a union vote this month. That's been delayed, at least for now, but they might come back to that. Now, as for kind of a larger trend, Neil, you hear people say big labor may be catching on with big tech. What the experts say is that Apple and Amazon are probably better targets for unions than maybe some of their other competitors because they employ so many people in retail jobs and warehouse jobs, which traditionally have been more friendly to unionizing. Neil?
Just amazing. Connell, thank you very much.
Yes. Yes, it is very much amazing. This is great. This is awesome news. I want to see more of this. Every time I hear about another store organizing and starting a union, I just get really excited because I told you guys last year that 2022 was going to be the year for labor because we had already started to see this happen with John Deere. We saw this happen with the nurses here in Massachusetts. We've seen it happen across the board. We saw it happen at Kellogg's. So I think this is the time. And so I want you to see the looks on their faces, though, because I do feel like, look at the looks on their faces. Watch this. Yeah. Oh, not there. He just looks confused, huh? How could this be happening? How dare these employees who work their ass off? By the way, I had a friend that worked at an Apple retail store. They work really hard. How dare these employees not be happy for the $22 an hour that Apple is giving them? How dare they beg for more? Who do they think they are? I can't believe this is happening. What a bizarre episode of events here. That's the look he has on his face. $22 an hour in Maryland is not a lot. I'm just going to tell you, it's not a lot. So there's that. And then they work really hard. So yes, they should form a union. And I want to show you something else in reference to Apple. Let me go back to Case. Because Case posted something else. I didn't have a chance to put it on here. Doopy doopy doo. There's a video Case had in reference to what they are making in Apple. Oh, is that the one? Ah ha ha ha. I want you to see part of this. I'm not going to show the whole part, but I just want to show you what they are making. How well Apple is doing as a company. That's why I say they can afford it. Let me lift up the volume. Okay. Listen to this.
This is really emblematic of a larger problem in the Bay Area, and specifically in the Silicon Valley. The gap between the poor and the wealthy is widening. Here are some of the key takeaways from the just released Silicon Valley Pain Index. That's what it's called, the Pain Index.
You guys see this? This is in Silicon Valley, okay? Santa Clara County GDP, $340 billion. 46% of children live with families in need.
Last year, Santa Clara County generated more wealth. The gross domestic product rose to $340 billion. Many of our big tech companies, including Google, Apple, Netflix, and Meta, making billions more in profit. But 46% of the children living in the Silicon Valley live with families who don't earn enough to provide the basics. We're just talking about food, shelter, and clothing. 46%. At the same time, look at this. People of color are seeing their annual income drop. The average income for full-time black workers is at $70,000 per year. That's a drop of nearly $2,600. Pay for Latino workers dropped slightly to $60,000 a year. That's a drop.
And I just want to mention something to you. Depending on where you live, these numbers may actually mean a lot. But I can tell you, having friends that have lived there and had to come back to the East Coast because they couldn't afford it anymore, $70,000 in Silicon Valley is nothing. That's nothing there. Also the same for the 60,000 as well. So you have a company like Apple making billions and billions of dollars, but the people in the same area where Apple originated and where they're still there, in that Silicon Valley, the tech industry there makes a lot of money. The people who live there can barely afford to survive. Anybody see a problem with this? This is the problem. It's such a corrupt system.
Of $400. Pay for whites and Asian Americans have increased. So why is this happening? And is there anything that can be done about it? Joining us now is Dr. Scott Myers-Lipton. He's the lead author of the Pain Index and a professor at San Jose State. Professor, nice to have you back on the program. Blacks and Latinos struggling, whites and Asians are not, according to your data. Is this any different from the year before or the year before that?
I'm going to go ahead and answer that question for you guys. Part of that has to do with the fact that I'm willing to bet when you look at employment in that area, who's employed at those tech companies? There aren't as many Black people or Latino people hired by tech companies. It's a big problem. All of my friends that have worked in tech, they talk about it. It's a known issue. So I'm willing to make a bet that the reason why white families and Asian families in that area are receiving an increase is because they're probably working at the Googles and the Apples in those areas, and they're getting those pay raises and those increases. That's part of it.
Well, what's happening is that, as the report highlights, is that there's this persistent racial inequality that exists within Silicon Valley. We've reported that for the last several years since the murder of George Floyd, and that's what really inspired us to do the Silicon Valley Pain Index, was to see how race and racism plays out right here in our own community rather than Minnesota or other places. So we've been documenting and doing a meta-analysis of the studies that are done on Silicon Valley. And as you pointed out so well, that this persistent racism is not only still there, but in some of these areas getting worse. And that wealth inequality that you talked about.
Eric, who was that? Who was that comment? Chris, what? Chris said, is that Jimmy Dore's dad? John to Emily said he does look like Jimmy Dore. What? See, I lost my train of thought now. Let me go back to the video. Sorry.
This incredible, astronomical amount of wealth. Apple Computer up 91 billion. Google and Netflix and the others up 30, 32, and $60 billion. respectively. So they're doing all this money being created. And then that number so powerfully stated, 46% of our children in our community living in families that don't provide the basics. So something is terribly wrong with how the...
I can't finish this video. Anyway, you guys get the point. The Apple and Google companies there are making billions, and the people who live there are barely even making enough to get by, especially if gas is like $7 a gallon right now as well. I can't unsee it now. Now when I look at this guy, because everything you guys are saying in the chat, I can't unsee it now. I got to take him off my screen. But you get the picture. So kudos to the employees at the Apple retail store in Maryland. Shout out to you. Congratulations. You're doing the damn thing. I think I have comments on Rockfin, right, Eric? God, I can't unsee it now. Oh boy. Okay, thank you for the tip on Rockfin. One love. Florida government is plagued with organized crime. Don't forget Matt Gaetz' buddy Joel Greenberg, who was charged with sex trafficking out of his office as a tax collector. Aha. Thank you for that reminder. Thank you for this tip on Rockfin, Roger. There are two ways to look at what government can and can't do. Think about this for a moment. Some in the judiciary interpretation of the Constitution will say, well, if the Constitution doesn't say you can do it, it means you can't do it. More left-leaning judges and justices and executives see it and say, well, the Constitution doesn't say I can't do it. Whatever the it is. So as far as I'm concerned, I can. That's a good point, Roger. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. You guys are killing me in the chat, man. Oh my God. I think I have a couple more comments here. Oh, shout out to Case Study QB. Much love, Sabby Sabs in chat. What's up, Case? JB says, I want to see Apple made into a worker co-op. Oh, I bet you there's something Roger Meadows could get behind that. Kid, Sabby, there is tremendous amount of gentrification in Silicon Valley, and most natives have left San Jose and its surrounding areas. So I see San Jose has been hit too, huh? Interesting. At one point in time, that used to be the more affordable place to move to. LA comedians, Jimmy Dad 2024. I gotta get out of here. I can't do this. I can't keep a straight face. All right, guys. I can't even, it's still up on my screen too, on the other screen. You guys can't see it on the monitor. I have to switch to a different thing because it's cracking me up. Okay, guys. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'll be back tomorrow night. Should be a fun show. I have a special live stream on Sunday night. I have a very special guest coming on. I'm super excited about that. I'll tell you who the surprise guest is tomorrow night. Other than that, guys, sign up for my newsletter. If you're not signed up already, should be pinned at the top of the chat. You'll get alerts every time I go live, so you don't have to rely on YouTube to do that. If you're on Call-In, subscribe to me on Call-In, guys. I had one today. I'm going to have one again tomorrow night as usual. I'm trying to get to 1,000 subs on Call-In. I know it's a stretch, but I'm trying to. I think I'm over 500 subs right now on Call-In, but I'm trying to get up there. So definitely check it out. And there's one more. Oh, okay. On Rockfin. Okay. And thank you for this tip, Jim Garrison. Sabby, here's a 5 spot for you. Really love your truth telling, and you look so fine doing it. Keep it up. Thank you so much, Jim. Kudos. All right. I gotta head out. I can't get that whole picture. What you guys are saying looks like Jimmy Dore's dad is hilarious. Okay. All right, guys. I'll be back tomorrow night, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Until then, have a good night. Keep up the fight.